guys, it's Miss Sarah from the West Bank Boys and Girls Club, and we're continuing on with the dreadful fate of Jonathan York. When we last saw him, he was alone going through the swamp, knocked on a tree, and then dropped down to who knows where. So we're going to find out how this wraps on up. He landed with a thud in a dimly lit room. The walls were lined with an array of stolen goods. Bags of coins, stashes of jewelry, fancy fur coats. To the left was a rack of various knives, swords, and other weapons. Mr. York could not hang. Although his sheltered life had limited his knowledge of the world's shadier aspects, it was clear to him that he had blundered into the hideout of thieves. The sting of an icy blade being pressed to the nape of his neck made him wince. "Hold still, stranger, lest she be wishing to see the color of your insides." They were the weirdest looking thieves Mr. York had ever seen. Their features were hideous. One had a long, gnaw-like snoot. Another had 8 spidery limbs. They were dressed in a hodgepodge of ragged clothing, no doubt collected from past victims. "He's a sickly un, but the looks of it," sneered the gar-faced thief. "Oh, thin and pale like." "Aye," agreed the 8-legged thief. "Likely won't be of much use, suspects I." A tall thief with eel-like neck held out a rusty blade to Mr. York's chin. "On your feet, wretch!" Mr. York wobbled upright and put his hands in the air. "Please, I didn't mean to trespass. I was only following directions given to me by—" "Shut your grub hole! Empty your pockets!" Mr. York flipped his pockets inside out for the second time that night. A lone scrap of unraveled dental floss floated to the ground. "Graggle fetters! It isn't worth tuppence! What is it? What did Trellis think sending us an empty pocket weakling?" A tiny thief sporting an oversized helmet leaped forward and brandished a mace. "Mash 'em, says I! Slice 'em to ribbons and use 'em I'm a nipper-lunge bait." The helmet-headed thief swung the mace mere centimeters from Mr. York's nose. Breath caught in Mr. York's chest. He expected his brains to be on the floor in a second or two. "Stop!" called a voice from the back of the hideout. "Let down your weapons, fools, and step away from our guest." It was a cold, throaty voice, a voice that sounded like water burbling through a sunless cavern. The thieves lowered their blades and stepped aside. There stood a figure draped in a cloak and wide-brimmed hat. The shadows cast by the hat completely obscured the figure's face. "What's your name, comrade?" asked the figure. Though still very afraid, Mr. York could feel his panic subsiding. It was replaced with stifling coldness. "Jonathan York," he squeaked. "Welcome to our humble home, Mr. York. My name is Finstermo Blime, and together we are the West Bleeport Gang." The needle nose, the cold needle Mr. York's spine. West Bleeport Gang? Where had he heard that before? "You're shivering, Mr. York," said Blime. He tilted his head up, and now Mr. York could see he was smiling. It was a broad smile, a smile full of gleaming dagger teeth. "There's no need to be frightened. We're all friends here. Isn't that so?" The other thieves bobbed their heads in agreement. "And now you're our friend too, right, Mr. York?" Blime drew close enough for Mr. York to make out his face. He was horrified to see that it was all smile. No eyes, no nose, just a huge dagger-toothed grin. "Sure," Mr. York stammered, nearly choking on his answer. "Shake!" Mr. York reluctantly took Mr. Blime's gloved hand. It was firm and cold. "Good. Now that we're friends, we'll let you in on our little project. You see, we're in the midst of a genuine treasure hunt. Hey, comrades." The other thieves tittered. "You'll join our treasure hunt, won't you, Mr. York?" "Well, actually, Sure you will. Everyone likes a treasure hunt. Now, no sense in aging around the old hideout. There's work to be done." Blyme turned and drifted up a flight of crude stairs. Mr. York, on the verge of a shock-induced torpor, was frozen in place until the Garface thief gave him a shove. His legs moved involuntarily, jerking up and down like the legs of a marionette, carrying him outside to the West Bleeport gang. They moved away from the trail and through the wilds of Half Rock. They skirted stink pits and mark holes, sidestepped boulders and brack pools, past trees twisting skyward like the limbs of long-dead insects, and brooks burbling bad poetry. "Did you hear that, Mr. York?" said Blyme. Mr. York listened. Somewhere in the gloom he heard voices singing and caterwauling. "Chivalry's sirens, Mr. York," said Blyme. "Half-Rock's banshees, we call 'em. It's said they sing right after the swamp claims a victim. Or before. I can never remember which." The voices crescendoed to an hair-singeing shriek, then fell silent. Mr. York could only hear the blood thumping in his head. "It's going to be a good night, Mr. York," said Blyme. At last they reached the dark pit of brackish water and algae. "Being new to our organization, you shall have the honors, Mr. York," said Blyme. The other thieves pushed Mr. York forward. "What do you mean? What are we doing here?" "We need to retrieve the key to the treasure chest. Can't open a chest without a key, can we, Mr. York?" "I suppose not. Where's the key?" Blyme gestured to the pit. "Down there?" Mr. York squealed. "Aye, but more specifically, it's in the belly of the Bogglemire." Mr. York felt faint. What's the Bogglemire?" "Big monster," said the Garface thief. "Big mouth, big hunger. It's all swallowed one of our mates when he had the key in his possession. Now the key's in his stomach." "But how am I supposed to get the key out of the monster's belly?" "Oh, there's a way," grinned Blyme. "You see, the Bogglemire's got lots of teeth, but only he uses them to keep his meals in after he swallows them whole. Once you're in the Bogglemire's belly, you should be able to get the key, no problem." "You mean I have to let this thing eat me? You can't be serious." Mr. York could see they were. "But how do you expect me to get back out?" "That's the tricky part. You see, the Bogglemire's got an odd digestive system. What it don't use, it spits back up his waste. Once you're in the beast's belly, you've got about 10 minutes before it guts you to melt your flesh and turn your bones to clay. So if you want to make it out again with our key, you have to do something that makes the Bogglemire think you're not worth having in its gut pit, so it'll spit you back out before you're through digesting. Either way, you're coming back up as your whole self, or as a pile of half-digested scraps. Which do you prefer?" "This is ridiculous," cried Mr. York. "There's got to be a better way." The thieves drew their weapons in unison. Blyme stepped forward, fingering his jagged blade and flaunting his cold dagger-tooth smile. "Now holds it there, Mr. York. You said you was game to our treasure hunt. Well, I seems to recall you shaking me own hand on it. Am I right, Schmeevel?" "Aye," piped the Garface thief. "'Twhat I thought," said Blyme. "And around these parts, that's a binding agreement." "Yes, but," began Mr. York. "We may be thieves, but we still good and proper, ain't we, Slurth?" "True!" chimed the eel-necked thief. "Course it is," hissed the advancing Blyme. "Just let me," whined Mr. York, stepping back. "And being proper gentlefolk we is, we don't much appreciate comrades going back on their word," especially when we go out of the way to let him in on our business. But if I could just... Miss York realized too late that the thieves had been backing him towards the edge of the pit. Blyme leaned forward and tapped Mr. York on the chest. Poor Mr. York toppled into the murky water with a yelp. Mr. York floundered to the surface and groped for the bank. The Garface thief shoved him back into the pit. Please, Mr. York begged, don't do this. Remember the plan, said Blyme. Get the key and get out somehow. No, I can't do it. I'm demanding you let me out now. To his surprise, the thief stopped grinning and backed away from the edge of the pool. For a split second, he believed his outburst had startled him into submission. A booming gurgle behind his back made him think otherwise. All right, guys, we're going to see what happens in this inky water. Do you think he's going to get eaten? We'll find out next time.